Top 5 90s cartoons for adults next on Retro Serial. Hello and welcome to Retro Serial. I'm so happy you could join us for this episode where we're talking about the top 5 90s cartoons for adults. Before we get to that list, there's a couple things that you need to know. First of all, I would be so honored if you subscribe to this channel and hit the like button, hit the bell notification, and share it on your favorite social media. The most important part of this is the like button and the subscribe button. These are really small steps for you, but they mean a whole lot to us here at the channel. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would really super appreciate it. Again, if you want to go the extra step, share it on your social media, hit the bell notification. That's all well and good too. That helps us get the word out about this program. And in the description below, you can follow the link to buy me a coffee if you want to donate some of your hard-earned cash to see us grow this YouTube mogul empire here. Also, there's a couple things you need to know about the program as well. Okay, so one more preliminary issue before we tackle the show, and that is these are cartoons that really kind of had their heyday in the 90s. They came out in the 90s and had really their most popular watches in the 90s. So, for example, two shows that are super popular and really good shows won't be on the list, and that is The Simpsons and The Family Guy, both for kind of different reasons. Number one, The Simpsons really started in the 80s, went through the 90s, and even to the 2000s, even up to today. So it's really kind of hard to peg this as a 90s show because of its origin, because of its continuation. So great show. I love The Simpsons. Was a huge fan when it came out on Tracy Ullman's show, but and when it first aired, but it won't be considered to be on this list. The other one is The Family Guy. The Family Guy actually came out in 1999, and that first season was just great. I love the first season. It's actually one of my favorite seasons, but it really started having its heyday in the 2000s. So again, even though it came out in 99, its heyday really wasn't in the 2000s, so it's really difficult to pin that as a 90s show. These are really shows, like I said, that came out in the 90s and really had their heyday and most watches in the 90s. So let's get to the list. Coming in at the number 5 position is Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy was part of a lineup called Nicktoons. It came out in 1991 and finished airing in 1995. What a great 90s cartoon. I loved Ren and Stimpy. I found them to be completely hilarious. I love their songs. You know, the Wood song. That was such a great song. It was so funny. I love their kind of gross humor, and also their shenanigans was a great part of their programming, and the gross close-ups of hair and all kinds of stuff. You know, you had the dog and the cat and you know, anyway, you love the show. I love the show, and it deserves to be on this list. For me, it took the number 5 position. Okay, coming in at number 4 is The Critic. I don't know if you're aware of this show or if you like this show. It had a short run. It only had 2 short seasons. It ran from 1994 to 1995. It started on ABC. It ended up on Fox. It was by John Lovitz, but one of the things that I really loved about this program is that it was one of those early cartoons that began to be kind of introspective about our own culture. There was a lot of cultural references in the show. You know, references about pop culture and even underground culture reoccurred on the show. And the cartoon was about a critic called Jay Sherman, and the movies they would review was like, you know, instead of like The Lion King, it was The Cockroach King, and it was Speed 3 or Speed 2 or something like that. It was called Speed Reading. They were hilarious parodies. So they had a lot of parodies in the show too. And there were a lot of things about pop culture and stuff that would kind of reemerge and they would make fun of, which was kind of becoming popular at the time to kind of make fun of or, make comments on pop culture, which is, part and parcel of Generation X, especially Generation X as it starts to grow up. As we start to grow up, we start looking back at 80s stuff and 70s stuff and start making comments about that. Oh, that's what that was, making comments about some television show or something like that. And that became a theme that really kind of emerged, I think, in the Family Guy. The Family Guy does that kind of thing all the time, but the Critic was doing that way before Family Guy did it. So if you haven't watched it, there are free episodes on YouTube. I suggest checking it out. I love The Critic. It was a great show. It comes in at number 4 for me. Coming in at number 3 is Beavis and Butthead. Now, you knew that this would be on a list of cartoons, from the 90s. For many of you, you might have picked this as number 1. But again, this is my list. This is just, how I'm thinking about things and the way these things struck me. Beavis and Butthead was certainly not number 5, but for me, it wasn't number 1 either. It comes in at number 3 for me. There are a few cartoons ahead of it that actually had a bigger impact on me as a 90s brat, as kind of a young adult in the 90s. But what a terrific show. And in some ways, of course, The Simpsons kind of kicked this era off. But in other ways, this kind of dark humor, Beavis and Butthead kind of kicked it off as well. This kind of sarcastic kind of humor. It ran, I think I ever said it ran from 1993 to 1997, although it did try to get a little bit of a reboot in the late 2000s just recently. But it had 7 seasons, 7 great seasons. It was part of this early thing called liquid television. I don't know if you remember this. It was on MTV where they would play these episodes, and they had Frog Baseball, and it was so popular that MTV signed wanted to sign a contract with Mike Judge to actually make this an actual television series. They were idiots. They even had their own movie, which was fantastic. And we loved following them on their little stupid adventures and then the big adventure, Beavis and Butthead Do America. But one of my favorite things about Beavis and Butthead was actually them watching videos. You got to see some obscure videos and then bands that I could go to the record store and look up later. But they were just kind of funny. They're also credited. I think there's a video somewhere on YouTube about how Beavis and Butthead ruined Winger, because oh gosh, I'm going to forget his name right now, but the guy with the t-shirt that said Winger on it, they would always make fun of him. And anyway, there's a video out there called How Beavis and Butthead Ruined the reputation of the band Winger. Go check it out. Beavis and Butthead. Is it number 1 on your list? I want to know. Let me know in the comments section below. Number 2 for me is Daria. Daria appeared in broadcast for the first time in 1997 on MTV and actually went into 2002. But its heyday, again, was really in the 90s. The reason why it only survived 2 years in the 2000s is because people were dwindling. Its audience was dwindling by the 2000s. But Daria, to me, was of course, it was a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead. But by this time, in 1997, in the late 90s, that real kind of sharp, sarcastic humor and the glorification of the underdog was really at its height. It was really at its pinnacle. And goth girls or geek girls were really starting to come into their own, and it started to be not just an underground thing, but an actual cool thing. And Daria rode that wave perfectly. I loved her. I loved her friends. I loved her crush. I loved her family. Her being kind of this black sheep in this me generation family. With a sister who was all into being popular and her best friend who was an artist. It was such a good show and really struck a chord for all of us who were young adults at the time. Daria, one of my favorite, number 2 position, came in ahead of Beavis and Butthead, even though it was a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead. But I'm going to guess for a lot of people, Beavis and Butthead's going to come in at the number 1 position. You're mad at me because it didn't. But Daria, for me, was just a more impacting show. All right, that's it for Daria. Let's go on to the number 1 position. Before we get to the number 1 position, I just wanted to digress for a moment and make something clear. Okay, these were comedy adult cartoons. There was a subset of cartoons out there that were drama cartoons, but I didn't get into those as much to make a full top 5 list. Maybe I'll review those later. But let me just say, by way of honorable mention, if there was going to be a top 5 adult list of cartoons that appeared in the 90s, there would be 2 shows on there that would be there. They're some of my favorite, but I was thinking about putting them on the list, but I thought, okay, I'm mixing kind of drama stuff and comedy stuff together. So I decided to go strictly with comedic cartoons. But if I could add 2 to this list that would go outside that comedic genre, it would be Aeon Flux and the Max. Terrific cartoons. Aeon Flux, a classic, and the Max, phenomenal. If you have not watched the Max, prepare yourself. Deep, psychological, very disturbing, and very heroic. Go out and watch it if you dare. It's a great show. They both appeared on Liquid Television. That's where I got them, and we even got the Max on VHS. That's how much we enjoyed that show. The Max was one of my favorite shows, but because of its dark nature, it didn't really belong on this list anywhere. And because Aeon Flux was more of an adventure show and a serious show, I didn't really think it was great for this list. So now, with that said, as those 2 as being honorable mentions, let's go on to our number 1 position. Okay, coming in at number 1. I don't know if you can guess it or not. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, because you probably thought, well, he blew through all the, is it King of the Hill? Is it, those would be all, good shows, honorable mentions and such. King of the Hill came close to making it on, but I actually liked Ren and Stimpy a little bit better than King of the Hill. Okay, so I'm not going to keep you in suspense any longer. Dr. Katz, professional therapist. Absolutely 100% love the show. Absolutely 100% love the show. It ran from 1995 and even into 2002. Again, by 2000s, the popularity was dropping off, so it didn't last too long into the 2000s. But the squiggle vision was great. It had 6 seasons to its name. It appeared on Comedy Central as part of Comedy Central's lineup, and the premise of the show was based on Jonathan Katz. Jonathan Katz was a great stand-up comedian. I loved his stand-up. It was really good, and when he came out with the show, I was super excited for it. And the idea was that he would get comedians to come in and take therapy sessions, and in the therapy sessions they would kind of go through their act a little bit, so they would talk about their families or their life or growing up, and Dr. Katz would kind of act like a therapist to them, and they would be able to kind of go through their comedy. And some of the first episodes, first few seasons, were just hilarious in that way. For example, a lot of what Ray Romano did on the show, where, it really seemed like a therapy session where he was talking about his family, a lot of stuff that comes out in his comedy, and talking about, his wife and his kids and his parents and stuff like that, really came across as him doing his stand-up, which was hilarious, but also came across as a hilarious therapy session as well. Also, his secretary, who is this lippy girl who, really won't be told what to do, but in the end has a heart of gold, and his son, who is just this going nowhere, no ambition kind of kid. It's enough to drive you up the wall to want to reach through the television and kick that kid in the keister. But man, did it make great comedy. I love the show. Now, I do have to say that it is my favorite number one position on this all time. But later in the show, it kind of became more about the stand-up and less about the stand-up in the context of therapy. The therapy started to take a dive in it, and it really was like, okay, you're on my couch and you're just doing this stand-up. In the beginning, and the first, at least 4 seasons, maybe first 3 seasons, it was really that interaction between the comic and Dr. Katz and their stand-up being part of therapy. In the last couple seasons, I can see why it started to dwindle in popularity, and it's due to the fact that interaction just became less and less. It just kind of became more about, you're sitting on a couch, do your stand-up, comedian, go ahead and do your stand-up. And that just wasn't appealing to me. But those first 3 or 4 seasons were absolute gold. It does take my number one position. What would have been on your list? What was on my list that you didn't like? How did you agree? How did you disagree? Please leave it in the comment section below. And as always, it would mean a great deal to me if you like this video to please like it and subscribe. That would mean the world to me. I'd be so honored if you did that. Go further, hit the bell notification, share it on your favorite social media. And again, that one extra step further, if you want to follow the link below and to the Buy Me a Coffee where you can donate to what we're doing here, you can go ahead and do that. I am Ian C., and this has been Retro Serial. I hope to see you again on another episode.